Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about why security awareness training usually fails and how to implement security awareness training as a cultural change piece as opposed to a one-off activity that we forget once we've done it. So, the uncomfortable truth. Most training is designed to prove completion. So, for a lot of organizations, if you get cyber awareness insurance, for example, part of the, conditions for having valid insurance is ensuring that people complete training annually once a year. So that's usually, you log into a portal, you watch some videos, you answer some questions, you do that about once a year. And that's normally like a checkbox exercise. That's what you have to do in order to be insured. However, when you approach it like that, it's almost like a point in time thing. And it's something that people, they see it as almost like an exam. So you study for the exam, you cram for the exam, you take the exam. After that, you forget about it. Most people, once they've done an exam, they bury that information far, far away and they don't refer to it day to day anymore. So yeah, like I said, we want to approach cyber awareness training as a behavioral change exercise. So that means people are seeing material. I'm going to go into format later. So people are seeing material, they're digesting the material, and then they're implementing it within their day to day life. And then also talking about how people forget generic cyber security advice quickly. I find that if the information doesn't resonate with people, it kind of seems like a very far away issue. It seems like something that happens to people over there, and it has nothing to do with us over here. And then also founders assume that because training has been completed, so going back to the cyber insurance example, people have gone onto the portal, you can see that 90% or 95% of the organization has completed the cyber awareness training. So you have it in mind that, we're covered, everything is fine. Most of the time that's not the case because cyber attacks related to people tend to evolve quite quickly. So you need to have a more cultural approach to make sure that people are aware of what it means to be cyber aware. And then awareness only works when it connects to real work. I really believe that. I noticed that when you make cyber awareness training related to people and their day to day lives, it's a bit more easy to internalize as opposed to making it generic and business related. So, why does this matter for startups? So, startups move fast and rely on trust. And there's also sometimes a bit of informality there as well. So, you want to do things quickly. You might not have as much governance in place. So, let's say like procurement or something like that, rather than having a lengthy process that takes a long time, there's a lot of like checks and balances to be made. You might have more of a rapid approach to ensure progress, which as a startup it makes sense, but then it also introduces the opportunity for mistakes to be made. So I'll give a real life example. Over To be fair, invoice fraud has been on the up for years at this point. But imagine you receive an email from someone that looks like one of your standard suppliers, one of your crucial suppliers, and they say that moving forward, your payments are moving from account A to account B. You might just look at it and think, okay, yeah, great, I'll move the next payment over for the next to make basically making the next payment to the new account that they've prescribed. However, what you don't know is that is an attacker that has hijacked your supplier's account or has mimicked your account, and you're sending money to someone that isn't who you think it is. Another common example for that is rent. So during COVID, there was like a spike in people impersonating landlords and saying that have been account changes or estate agents, and as a result, people sending money to the wrong account. So that means that not only have they sent money to the wrong place, but they now need to come up with money to send to the original place. So they need, yeah. So in short, it's a problem. As a startup, I think you're more susceptible to that because, especially let's say in finance, there's only one person or the founder is also wearing the finance hat. It's very, very plausible that there's no one else that you speak to, or there's no centralized mailbox where multiple people have seen what the request is, or you haven't experienced it before for whatever reason. So I think it's more than plausible that you fall for something like that, which is not necessarily your fault, but it's just again developing awareness. So then access to data, vendors, and payments are exposed daily. So, like I mentioned before, a lot of people are wearing multiple hats. So, it's possible that a tiny amount of damage, no, a massive amount of damage can be done with just one person's account. A common attack that I've seen a lot is attackers targeting mailboxes. So imagine a mailbox of like a finance analyst. They've got a small subset of things that they deal with compared to someone that is wearing multiple hats. So founder, um, managing vendors, managing payments. Those and data as well. Those factors specific to startup expands the level of damage, like the surface areas for damage that can be enacted by an attacker. And then lastly, one mistake can affect clients' revenue and credibility. Reputation is everything. If a large conglomerate makes a mistake, but you're reliant on them, you're probably going to stay there. But if a startup makes a mistake, more than likely people are going to think to move on because, there's a wealth of options with higher experience or greater experience. So there's always that risk of making a mistake, especially where data is concerned. And then cybersecurity awareness needs to support real decisions. So it needs to be a thing that you can use day to day. So the best example for this is phishing. So if we give a protocol for spotting phishing emails, for example, so the one I always like to give is stop and then verify. So verify the email that you've received. So what are they asking you? Look at the email address, look at the overall email. Are there spelling mistakes in there? Is the request unusual? And then after that, I always say second opinion. So send to someone else. Does this look like something we should be doing? So using the same example of invoice fraud, if it's a very strange request and it doesn't look right, picking up a phone. I always like to pick up the phone and call the person that has requested the change, and then that way, for example, a lot of solicitors do that. So they ask that you call before sending any money over, just to make sure that there's no chance that you've been the email has been hijacked and then you're about to send money to the wrong person. Trust but verify. Okay, why training failed? So these are the root causes. The first one, I think this is one of the biggest issues, generic. So given the same content for every single role, I think a lot of cyber attacks are very contextual and it's based on seasonality as well. So I'll give you an example. From about October, let's say September, October, there are a lot of conferences in the UK for cybersecurity. So it would make sense for you to be receiving increased communications from external conference vendors and things like that. That would be normal. That would make sense. But if you're an individual that doesn't go to any conferences or you're not in cyber at all, that would be unusual. So I say all that to say it doesn't make sense for the CEO or the C-suite and the analysts and the marketing team and the sales team to all receive the same type of training. So I'll break that down a bit further. So the sales team, they are externally facing. It is normal to receive external emails when you're in the sales team. It's also normal to have tight deadlines to get agreements signed. There's a little bit of urgency there. That doesn't exist in the marketing team, for example. And then for the C-suite, let's say there's like an important deal going on, there might be a heightened reason or heightened motivation for someone to target them or hang out in the pubs near the office or stuff like that, just to get that extra bit of information because of their seniority. So I think it's a case of making sure that the training that you send out is proportional. I'll also add, let's say secretarial staff, they have responsibilities of buying, like making purchases, processing expenses and things like that. It's easy. I've seen it in the past where someone has asked a PA or a secretary to buy some gift vouchers because that is normal for their day to day. But if a cyber analyst is being asked to do that, that would raise alarm bells. So that's why it's important to make sure that training is very, very context driven. So as you're delivering the training, rather than saying, if the request sounds strange, ignore it or verify it. Make it specific. So if you're a secretary or if you're a PA or if you're a cyber analyst, make it very specific so someone can look at it and say, "Oh yeah, they're talking to me." It's not going to go over their heads once they're able to relate to it. So make it relatable. Annual. So one-off training with no reinforcement. This is a difficult one. So touching back on the example of like the cyber insurance requirement. So having to do annual training. I always say if your cyber insurance provider is asking you to complete annual training, go ahead and do that. But on top of that, to think more of that, the cultural piece, create a curriculum. So over the year, what are you doing? So I've implemented phishing simulation. So, for example, every single month there's a phishing simulation. So there's a bunch of different providers. I'm not going to suggest a specific one, but there's a bunch of different providers sending out a phishing campaign. So seeing who clicks, and then of the people that click, send out another one, and then that can flag that someone has clicked once, twice, maybe three times, and there needs to be some sort of intervention, but just not relying on the one-off training because the phishing simulation I see it as a practical. So seeing where people's knowledge is at, because if the reality is if they have a strong understanding of phishing, they're not going to be that susceptible. And again, in terms of approach, don't make this like a telling off exercise, but just make it a what did you struggle with, even if it's one to one. So there's nothing wrong with pulling up the email that they clicked on and saying what made you want to click on it, and then educating them in the areas that you've determined that they are, I guess, weaker in. It doesn't need to be it's not like a berating exercise. It's an exercise to understand where the pitfalls might be, because then that means whatever you find you can include in communications. On top of that, so you've got your phishing training, for example, or your phishing simulation, for example. You've got your annual training. On top of that, I like to do, organizations call them different things, but the equivalent of a regular session. So it could be once every 3 weeks, once every month, just like a session to say, this is almost like spotlighting an area in cybersecurity. And in these sessions, make it very practical. So rather than making it very corporate based, make it something they can understand. So for example, during lockdown, I think like Netflix and Disney accounts, there were a lot of phishing scams because a lot of people are using those accounts. So those scams where they send you an email, ask you to change your password or ask you to update your bank card, or just something where you're going to be giving away information. Putting it like that puts it into perspective for people, because they'll look at it like, oh, actually, I remember that, or it's just something that they'll remember more. So because of the example, because it's close to home, they'll remember it, and then they'll remember that they need to check before doing things. So that's another thing. But the purpose of having like sessions like that for me is to have like a light touch point, something like light-hearted, something that people can sit, discuss. I love discussion, because the more you discuss as like cyber versus the rest of the business, the more you discuss, the more people become comfortable with you. So if they have those small questions, they're more likely to send you a Teams or Slack message to ask and clarify, if they receive anything that they're not too sure about. So that's also creating like a cultural change in terms of cyber awareness. In a year, I try to like have like at the beginning of the year, I try to like write out what I plan to do as cyber awareness. So making sure that you've got every, I think at least in a month you should have some sort of cyber awareness pushing activity. So that's on top of the phishing, that's on top of the annual testing. Have something that people are going to have be able to like discuss. And then on top of that, some organizations do like newsletters as a way, like every Friday sending out a newsletter, almost summarizing the news out there. There's always something. So whether it's a social engineering compromise, or a company that have experienced a cyber attack, whatever it is, doing a little roundup. If you already have an organizational newsletter, you can ask for a segment, just to make sure that it's remaining front of mind. Something I also noticed has worked well is having like either a Slack or Teams channel with like cyber news. So just sharing things in there. If you see something that's a bit like, oh wow, shocking, sending it in there and allowing people to like discuss. And to me, anything that generates discussion is always a great idea, because it's educating people in a casual way. The same way, for example, as much as I like long form content, sometimes scrolling on Twitter is nice just to see little bites of news, and then things that I'm interested in, I can click and listen or research more on. Next, passive. People watch but do not practice. The best way to make sure that people have understood is getting involved. So that's where having interactive sessions, so that the weekly, well, depends on your organization, because it might not be feasible to have a weekly, but like, let's say like a monthly event. It could be like a lunchtime session, where it's like discussion based and like sharing practical, the opportunity for people to ask a lot of questions. And then next, unmeasured. Completion is tracked, but behavior is not. So this goes back to the phishing example. So understanding how many people are clicking on phishing simulations, and then, I mean, ideally not, but if you have people clicking on real phishing emails as well, that's also another way of making sure that you're looking at how effective your cyber security awareness training is. And then lastly, disconnected, so not linked to incidents or real risks. In an ideal world, you'd be, before creating cyber awareness training for like the year or for the month or whatever it is, you'll look at the themes in the industry and also what's happening within your organization. Um, Giving people heads up around certain times of the year. So let's say around like Christmas or whatever it is, or conference season, making sure you're giving people heads up around what they should be almost expecting or anticipating to make sure that they're aware of it. Just as gentle reminders, really. Failure one, yep, too generic. So everyone is receiving the same examples. It's not too relevant to the work that's actually being done. So you can take a functional approach, so going by like department or going by job role, but just making sure that people see how the specific cyber risks that are applicable to them, because if it's not applicable, they're not going to take it too seriously. And then I also like to layer in the real life applicability, so like the Netflix and social engineering examples, or like the invoice scams that I've mentioned. Again, these are just things that are going to make it a bit more, so what, like why should I care as an individual, because at the end of the day, people relate more when it's something very specific to them. And then failure two only happens once a year. We need to make sure we have a schedule for the entire year. It doesn't need to be heavy, it just needs to be something that is effective. You want it to be a thing where people look forward to the sessions because they're interesting. So always look at it from the lens of, how can I make this more interesting? How can I deliver this in a way that is engaging? Because in a startup or even in normal businesses, people are very busy. If people are going to put aside 45 minutes to an hour, you want it to be worth their while. You want it to be interesting. You want it to have good repay value. So I like to record sessions. It's not ideal, but just for people that just couldn't make it, it's nice to record sessions, because then that also acts as training material in a way. People tend to replay things, in the background whilst they're working, and yeah, you're just encouraging people to attend future sessions if they find it interesting. And it focuses on completion. Completion can be a tick box exercise, so people can pay intense attention just to make sure that they pass the exam. So most places they say, I think like 80% or 70% or whatever it is. It's easy to pass an exam, especially if it's quite similar or it's the same every single year. But that's not an indication of anything, to be sincere. It's not an indication of anything. We need to still look at how people are behaving. So are people still clicking on risky emails? Are people aware of what they should be looking for? Those are the things you need to look at. So your phishing simulations and also your real life security events. It ignores real incidents. So training is often separate from what actually happened. We should be looking at repetition as an indicator of where there are deficiencies in people's knowledge in security awareness. So this also touches on the example I gave of the phishing simulation that you do at the beginning of the month, and then doing a secondary phishing simulation campaign to essentially retest people that clicked on the first ones. Someone that clicked on the first one but not the second, that's like an indication that maybe it was just a one off. But if you see that someone is consistently clicking month after month, this is where data comes in. So if you can see repeat offenders month after month, that's when serious intervention should come in, because there's something that we're not learning from previous exercises, and that needs to be addressed because that represents a risk. I would say it takes one click to bring down an organization. It doesn't take much at all. So it's important to make sure that across the board people understand exactly what they should be looking for in phishing emails. It is not role based. Exactly. So this breaks it down here. So founders face investor and payment fraud risk. That could be anything. So that could be, let's say an investor says, can you quickly, click on this document or whatever it is. And let's say it's been in the news that your company is currently in like a funding cycle or whatever it is. It's understandable that you'd maybe panic or be very, very keen to respond quickly without reading. But that's an example of a specific risk based on a role. Finance team face invoice and bank detail scams, very, very common. Engineers face code, cloud, and access risks. Sales team Sales teams handle client data and attachments. It's normal for them to receive attachments from external email addresses, but again, a level of, I guess, carefulness and taking your time is important. But like previously mentioned, when designing training, you need to make sure that the examples given are surrounding the role in question, just to make sure that it's relevant and it's understandable. Because, for example, using this example, investor and payment fraud risk for founders, that is not applicable to the sales team for the most part. So it's easy to ignore, and vice versa as well. Failure six, it avoids uncomfortable scenarios. So people need to practice saying no. People need to challenge unusual requests. People need to verify before acting. People need to report quickly without blame. Good training rehearses real pressure. So an example that I'll touch on is physical security. In a small company, it's easy to know who your colleagues are. So let's say there's like 10 people, you know everyone. Um, Compared to a larger organization, a lot of companies have policies around, you must always wear your lanyard, you must always be identifiable, and you must challenge anyone that you don't recognize. Challenge, like, especially, let's say you're a bit junior, you might be a bit shy to challenge someone, but that could be a malicious actor that's entered the building. It's um it's about having a culture where it's normal to challenge people, normal to question who people are, especially if they're not following rules. Or let's say you're entering the building and someone is trying to piggyback, they're trying to like sneak in behind you. It's about turning around and challenging them, even if it's uncomfortable. Um, and then also not acting panicked under pressure. So those examples where someone is saying that there's an urgent request, you need to do it right now. Take a pause, speak to your manager, speak to someone senior, speak to someone, and just double check: is this a normal thing to receive and to complete as a request? What good awareness should create? So people pause before acting. Much of the time, I feel like if you calm down and take a minute to pause, even to breathe, to take a breath, you'll kind of evaluate and it will look a bit funny to you. Like, for example, if some you've never been asked before, someone has suddenly asked you to buy £1,000 worth of gift cards and then you'll expense it back later. You might look at it like, oh, you've been having a challenging month, you haven't been performing that well, or something like that. Let me just quickly get it done. But then you have to pause and ask yourself, is that something that you should be doing? Is that normal for you? Quickly picking up the phone and verifying, even if you think it, you might think you're being slightly annoying, but just double checking to make sure that you're not opening up the company to risk or personally opening yourself up to risk. Um, verifying unusual requests, reporting suspicious activity. So if something doesn't seem right, I would say it's better to report it or to flag it and be wrong than for that to be one of the early signs of compromise and you ignore it. So for example, let's say all of a sudden your laptop is excessively slow, and there's no real reason for it to be performing like that. You might think, oh, maybe it just needs an update, but then your laptop might have been compromised. So always report things. And best case scenario, someone investigates and finds nothing. Worst case scenario, they investigate and they find something, and you've helped curb a disaster. People protect sensitive data. So this is around awareness to do with, let's say, data classification. So understanding that if you've got like a sensitive document, you need to store it and minimize access control compared to something that is public or external or something like that. Making sure that you have the awareness of your responsibilities as an individual. And then that follows on nicely to understanding their role in cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is something that is carried by everyone. It's not just a cyber team, it's not just an IT team, it is each and every person in the organization. So, touching back on the example of physical security, think of cybersecurity as a house. It's got the top of the range like locks. It's got high security windows. It is the perfect organization. Like, no, it's a perfect building structure. It's super secure. However, if someone leaves open a door, it doesn't matter how secure the window is or how secure the door is. You've left the door open. Cybersecurity or security awareness is about everyone knowing that they need to close the door before they leave. Like, that's everyone's responsibility. And then behavior change signals, so more phishing reports. A lot of organizations have phishing buttons deployed in the email system. So if you see an email that doesn't look quite right, clicking report so that someone can investigate it. Faster escalation, so seeing a problem, reporting it quickly, rather than feeling a bit shy, you're not too sure. Fewer repeated mistakes, so that is similar to the phishing example. Less repeat offenders. better access hygiene. So people are following the need to know least privilege process. So making sure that rather than giving everyone access to everything, you just have the access necessary to do your job. And then what works better? So this is to do with how you execute cyber awareness training. So the usual training is that annual video, generic examples. You use completion tracking as a way of, giving yourself a thumbs up that we've done it correctly. Little behavior change. So despite people completing the cyber awareness, noticing that nothing has really changed in terms of behavior. So culturally, nothing has changed. People haven't learnt more after training essentially, and then forgotten after training. So once the training exercise is done, let's say in January, by March everyone has forgotten, they've gone back to business as usual. Effective awareness system, so role-based security, role-based scenarios, so personalizing it to each role that you have within your business, or personalizing it by function. And then real startup risk, so looking at what risks your industry and your organization are specifically susceptible to. This could be due to where you are in the world, the type of work you do, etc. And then actions and behavior tracks, so month to month we should see if behavior is improving or worsening based on the measures we've put in place. And then reinforce regularly. So that could be that Teams channel or that Slack channel where we share news. That could be the lunch and learn session. So regular sessions where people can sit down and have conversations about cybersecurity and things in the industry. And then the opportunity for questions. And then linked to incidents and controls. So looking at our control effectiveness measures or exercises and making sure that we are tailoring our training based on what we are susceptible to as an organization. So that's also looking at incidents. So where are we falling down at the moment? Where are our near misses? Where are our confirmed incidents? And making sure that is worked into training as well. And then the better security awareness role model. Awareness model. So looking at real risk. So actually personalizing the risk to what our organization is facing, and a little bit of horizon scanning. So looking at the environment as well. And then role context. So looking at what the individuals are susceptible to. So the sales team versus accounting versus marketing, and then practice. So having opportunities for people to practice what they've learned. So whether that is in tabletop sessions. So tabletop sessions are where you simulate real life events, and you can like walk through what would you do, and then based on that you critique what people have done and say actually in the future you should do this, this and this. So it's giving them that real life opportunity to practice. We learn and improve through practice. And then reinforcements, repeating the behavior until it becomes normal. In organizations, especially if you're fast growing, you might find that you're reinforcing constantly, but that's fine. It's better to reinforce constantly and make sure that no knowledge is escaping the business, or people aren't forgetting, or the message isn't being diluted. But yeah, that's like a four-step approach to ensuring that security awareness models are robust and fit for purpose. And then how to redesign security awareness. So as mentioned before, start off with the risk your business actually face, and then build some role-based scenarios. And then once you've built some role-based scenarios, at that point you can consult with like function leads and say, this is what we've got as like a starting position. Is this accurate? Is there anything that needs to be added? Looking at the news, looking at your competitors, what are they facing? That's where sometimes joining forums, so like startups or your industry, can be helpful. Understanding what other people are going through, because a lot of cyber issues are by industry. Like there's a lot of commonalities there. Then using examples from incidents and near misses. So this is where you talk to the security team and you make sure that you're including examples from there. So making sure that the lessons learned are being integrated within cyber culture, and then reinforcing the same behaviors repeatedly. So through your monthly events, through your phishing simulations, and then measuring actions. So it can be as detailed as measuring every time you receive a cyber related query from the wider team. It can be measured by the attendance to your monthly events, and then it can be something as technical as phishing simulation results as well as like your incidents and near misses. So the question to founders is, do people know what danger looks like? So specifically for your organization, are you confident that people can identify cyber related issues? So whether it's phishing, whether it's physical building penetration, do people have an idea of what that looks like? And then do people know what to do when unsure? So do they have is there a nominated or well-known individual that they can go to for advice, and then do they have a deputy? So in case of like absence or whatever, do they have a deputy? Is there an email? Is there a mailbox? Is there a telephone number? Do people feel safe reporting mistakes? So this is more cultural. If you have a blame culture, it's unlikely that people feel safe reporting mistakes because they'll look at it like, oh, if I report it, maybe there'll be some sort of repercussion. But when it comes to cybersecurity, I would say most of the time that a lot of the key learnings come from the near misses or something that someone happens to come across and share. So you need to create a comfortable environment for people to share what they're learning and what they're seeing in the environment. And then, do managers reinforce the right behaviors? Are they leading by example? As like a manager, for example, walking around the business, you must have your lanyard on. You must make sure you lock your laptop when you get up. There's a lot of small things that contribute to the cyber culture, and then also like the lack of blame as well. So making sure that if someone does come to you, they're a bit worried, that they're provided with reassurance that, thanks for reporting it, and then also motivating them with how the investigation progresses to make sure that they are sure that what they found was not a problem or whether it is, but just having that educational lens around that. And then, does training reduce actual cybersecurity risk? If you're honest with yourself, you can sit and kind of know how interested you are um in the cyber awareness training. So put in the generic training aside that has to be done for insurance purposes. You know that if you're feeling engaged by a piece of content, so understanding, sitting down and saying, okay, I've designed this content. Would I happily sit here and take it? Would I be engaged and interested in this if I was a member of the public or if I was a member of the team? Um, yeah, those are questions to ask. And then the real test will be if people know the policy but still make the wrong decision under pressure, training has not worked. If there is a disconnect, it's similar to how if there is a prescribed way or like a prescribed process for doing something and people are not following it, there's something wrong with the process. There's something either uncomfortable or clunky about the process that people do not enjoy or that does not make them more productive, so they're avoiding it. In a similar way, people should be able to have enough tools. When I say tools, I mean like frameworks and things that you've provided them and equipped them with to look at an email, know that it's wrong or see something wrong in the environment and know they need to challenge it because you've empowered them with that and they've seen that by engaging your processes, there's no detriment. So that is the real test. Security awareness should change behavior. So once a piece of train, you should see change in your workforce after implementing different things. So if you bring out a suite of documents, you should see a corresponding change to that if you've integrated it properly and if you've made it something that people understand and it's been disseminated properly. In the same way, if you've had a training workshop or a tabletop exercise, you should see a direct result of that in behavior change. If changes doesn't change what people notice, report, question, or escalate or stop doing, it's not reducing your cyber risk. So, how do you actually fix this? I have a number of products that I've curated based on cyber awareness training. So, in the Startup Security Toolkit, there is one module dedicated to security awareness training. I will say it is a great start for startups, but if you need something more advanced, then there are other products more suited for that. But this is just an introductory product that will help you lay some foundations that you'll then build upon. Two, the Startup Security Implementation Kit. So this is turning the more foundational advice into something a lot more practical. So giving you some processes, giving you some worksheets to support or to facilitate security events, giving you some specific events and exercises that you can complete. So rather than having nothing in place or having something generic in place, it's giving you the information to create something new each year. And then lastly, this is a dedicated product. So just to go back for this implementation kit, this is also one module out of 10. And then the security awareness pack, this is like more of a practical training for startup teams. So this is more dedicated. This is going to have role-based training and it's going to have a lot more information, or it has a lot more information in there for designing security awareness for different industries and different roles. So giving you some more support to make sure that over time you're seeing that change in behavior, and also gives you some items for measuring measuring behavioral change over time, and integrating security awareness into your organization almost like a function rather than like a one off event that happens once a year just to say you've done it. But yeah, as usual, if you have any questions, feel free to either email me or place a question in the comment section. But thank you so much for watching.